This is the Tyneside suburb of Felling. It's where the children's author David Almond grew up and where he set his first and most successful book, Skellig, about two children who discover a tramp with angel's wings. It's also the setting for his latest book, The True Tale of the Monster Billy Dean, his first novel for an adult readership. Though in this book, Felling, renamed Blink Bonnie, has been shattered by war and terrorism. People often ask writers where they get their ideas from. David Almond is happy to tell you, as I discovered when I went to his home just outside Newcastle to meet the author. David Almond, we're standing here in your writing cabin in your back garden, surrounded by the things that went into creating Billy Dean and his world. Who is Billy Dean?
Billy Dean's he's a young boy that's been brought up in isolation. He's been locked away, kept away in a room at the back of a house. He has a father who visits him occasionally at night, a mother who's a hairdresser, but he's never allowed to leave the room. Outside, which he doesn't know, the world has been devastated. He's born into a time of war. The place around him, which is called Blink Bonnie, has been kind of smashed into smithereens, but he knows nothing about that. He just knows the room. He knows the birds that come to visit him. He knows the mice that run around on the floorboards. He knows his father. He knows his mother. And occasionally you see ghosts' faces passing by on the walls.
Now you have surrounded yourself here today with lots of images, pictures, maps, photographs. And I gather when you were writing the book, when you write all your books, this room is completely festooned with images and so on that are relevant. So just talk us through a few of them. I mean, there's a very powerful Don McCullin photograph there. What does that show?
Yeah, just before I started to write Billy properly, I went to see a fantastic John McCullin exhibition, which of course is about war, and you see ordinary people with their homes devastated, their lives devastated. And we always think of those things as being happening in other places, you know, somewhere far, far away. War happened somewhere else. And I started to think, what if the war came here? And it tied in with some of these photographs of Newcastle in the 60s when, you know, the flood slums were being cleared, the landscape was wiped away, and they were knocked down, and the whole earth was covered in rubble. And I remember as a teenager walking across places like that, and the sound of the rubble and the feel of the rubble.
Crunch, crunch,
crunch,
crunch.
crunch, crunch, and fires burning. And that all fed into Billy as well, the sounds of it, the textures of it.
And in Billy's world, something terrible has happened. We're led to assume it's a sort of war of religion, bombs have gone off, everything has been destroyed. And religion, it features very powerfully in the book. There are various bits of religious memorabilia around here. There's a Virgin Mary there. Religion doesn't come very well out of the book, does it?
I suppose in some ways it doesn't. I mean, I was brought up as a Catholic, and it's very influenced by Catholic imagery. And Billy's born into a world that maybe has been destroyed by religion. His father's a priest. The statues around have been smashed and devastated. And maybe the war that's there has been caused by religion, some kind of religious conflict. And I think in the process of the book, Billy is he's walking across the rubble of religion. He's discovering what lies in the rubble of religion. And he picks up bits and pieces of the old religion and puts them back together again. But I think what he does, he has a very kind of innocent religious eye himself, that he sees something wondrous in this world. You know, I think it's a book, it's obviously a troubled book that's kind of quite dark in many ways, but I think it's a book that moves towards the light. And I think Billy has an eye which sees wonder and joy and beauty even in a devastated landscape. Up
on the wall there's a map of Tyneside, and Tyneside's an important element in this, the landscape of Tyneside. Though subtly changed, you've moved Lindisfarne, the holy island of Lindisfarne, down the coast so that you can see it from the city. What does Newcastle and Tyneside mean to you?
Oh, it's almost the geography of my imagination, Tyneside. And it's kind of in my bones and in my blood. I can't get rid of it. And there's a kind of temptation a lot of time when you become a writer, you become some kind of artist, that you have to move away. But sometimes you find that actually you can't, that the thing that defines you is also the thing that kind of releases you as well.
Now, Billy's language, he writes as he talks, and he can't spell to save his life. You've got one of the sort of drafts of the manuscript here. Why did you decide that he would not write standard English?
I think he couldn't. If he's born, he's not been taught. His father shows him books. His father shows him things like facsimiles of the Lindisfarne Gospels. But Billy can't write. And if he can't write, then he can't write. But there's something about stories, whether you can write or not, you're driven to write stories. And Billy's kind of driven to write the story of his own life. I just had to decide, well, if he can't write, he can't write. So he just has to write this kind of phonetic English and hope that in the process of that he establishes some kind of rhythm. And people have said that once you're a page or two in, you begin to fall into Billy's rhythm, you begin to hear his voice. And the spelling actually, Billy makes a really, what seems to me a really important point. He says, the way to spell things right often looks weirder than the way to spell them wrong.
True enough.
Yeah.
This is billed as your first book for adults, though there's also an edition, different cover, exactly the same book, which is being marketed at young adults, teenagers. Why is this book for adults, whereas all your previous ones have been for children?
Well, I've always had a lot of adult readers, and a lot of adults will come to me and say to me, oh, this is quite a good book, how can this be? It's a children's book. And then they say, well, but why can't we find it on the adult shelves? So it's been in my mind to write a book that I thought could be put out for adults too, and talk to publishers about that. And when I began to write Billy and to give him time and space, it felt like this was the one. It was one that was longer, it was one that kind of probably went further into the darkness, that didn't hold back at all. But it's also a kind of natural kind of development of what I've been doing before anyway. It's not as if I said, oh, I've got to lunge out and reach into some new dimension. It feels very natural development for me.
What about the next book then? This is presumably going to be festooned with stimulating material in the near future. What kind of book is that going to be?
Yes, all of Billy will be taken out. And writing Billy was kind of physically like that. It felt obviously very tight because he's in this room and then it opens out into space and then eventually gets to somewhere, a place of light. So it was a movement like that. But the next book will be quite different, I think. I want to begin like that. More lights, more space, less thingy, less attached to things. So it'll feel like that. And I've begun to write it, and it's a different kind of book.
David Almond, thank you very much indeed.